Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Marie, and I will be the host for today's webinar on how to unlock the power of live traceability with Jama Connect. Before we dive into the content, I just have a few housekeeping items to share with you. So first, at the bottom of your screen are multiple application engagement tools that you can use, but most of them are already displayed on your desktop. Those engagement tools are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. You can expand your presentation area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you happen to have any audio or video issues during the presentation, you have a help yellow widget at the bottom of your screen. It will give you some answers to some common technical issues that you might face. Please note that we also have some resources for you on the side of the presentation area. We have the copy of today's slide deck together with a few help materials. So have a look and download everything that you may find useful. This webinar will be recorded and you will receive the recording by email within 24 hours. I also want to mention that we are here to answer you live via the Q&A widgets during the entire presentation. So if you have any questions, just submit them. We'll have a short Q&A session at the end. Well, we'll select some questions coming from the audience, but don't be shy and reach out to collect any information that you feel is missing. So now allow me to introduce you to our speakers. So we have today Jeremy Johnson, VP of Product Management at Jama Software. He's overseeing Jama Software's product strategy and roadmap, as well as product design and user experience. We will also have Debbie Mitchell, who is Product Manager. She's mainly focused on Jama Connect Interchange, the new Jama integration solutions, which powers live traceability across best-of-breed tools, including Jira and Excel. Debbie has over a decade of experience delivering enterprise software across a range of industries. And finally, we will also have Zeb Gary, who is part of our solutions team as principal consultant. He works with our customers to help them get the most out of the platform. And he has been at Jama since at least 7 years, working with all our customers across different industries. So they have some great content to share with you today. So I will hand it over to Jeremy, who is going to introduce you to the agenda.
Thank you, Marie. I appreciate it, and welcome everybody. Want to also extend my thanks and on behalf of Debbie and Zeb for all of you joining us here today. So as Marie mentioned, I wanted to go through today's topics. We're going to start with some of the common challenges that we see and hear from some of our customers and some of the companies and industry that we start working with around product development and requirements management. We'll talk a little bit about what we see as best practices of what we call live traceability versus a more after the fact and reactive approach. We'll talk a little bit about how you can achieve live traceability. And then we'll dive a little bit more deeply into how Jama Connect can help. We'll also introduce you to, as Marie mentioned in her intro, a new product from Jama Software, Jama Connect Interchange. And so we'll talk about how Jama can help enable live traceability and help support best practices. We'll end with a recap of some of the benefits and the impact that we've seen from customers in various markets. And as Marie mentioned, we'll get into some Q&A at the end. So again, let's start with some of the common pain points that we tend to see. So things like managing legacy systems, various Excel spreadsheets, no single version of the truth. You have maybe tedious manual effort, need to automate, change management, impact analysis is slow and manual. And if you're ultimately trying to do this traceability, try to manage data across different points, looking at risk management, maybe even desktop applications, that stuff is out of date 2 minutes later, right? It's not very timely. So you have a lot of these challenges from a complex product development standpoint. And what this typically goes back to, what it typically traces back to is something that tends to look like this, where companies are managing a very complex product development process, have multiple teams, different functions, and it creates silos, creates teams and data that are fragmented across functions and across tools. You may have things like hardware and software teams running in parallel, but not talking, or at least not talking enough, or not talking at the right times. You maybe have risk and quality and compliance teams that are engaged too late in the process, and maybe it's more of a serial flow rather than a early engagement and more collaborative and holistic process. Certainly some of these teams may be loosely coupled. Maybe some of the data points are, they sort of always seem to come together at the last moment. But do companies and do people really want to rely on that? Do you really want to count on those things happening so late in the game? How confident does that make organizations feel with a product launch looming, with an audit scheduled? That can be a very daunting and very disconcerting feeling that a lot of those things are happening just in time, rather than a more cohesive and coherent process. Another way to look at this problem that we tend to see with companies that we start working with is in the context of the V model, or the verification and validation model, which is fairly ubiquitous in complex product development. We'll touch on it here a few times in this session. But companies have all of these points of intersections throughout this process, as this process flows, and there's all these points, that you can see with X's between, where there's a need for connected data, and these are points where barriers can exist potentially as companies work between siloed tools, again, maybe desktop applications, particularly Excel and things like that. You have this myriad of tools, this myriad of best of breed tools to appropriately and efficiently execute this process. And the reality is, to bring all of these pieces together, there really isn't a single solution to this problem. It's best of breed tools, and again, even specifically in specific scenarios, maybe Office apps like Excel. That's really the norm, and will continue to be. That's the way people like to work. There are very bespoke solutions in certain parts of the product development life cycle, and that's the way it's going to continue to be. And to date, there's really no good way to bring all of these pieces together holistically, to get out of some of the manual processes, and certainly to link down to things including Excel. And this is where we really see, when these fragments are really separate, where they're siloed processes and siloed tools, this is really where we see, and certainly industry analysis and study will bear this out, that you have a really high opportunity for recalls and delays, increased corrective actions and preventative actions, cost overruns, and things like that. And here's a view specific to some information that's been published around this risk. And what this really illustrates is the increased expense that you see if you identify issues later in the process. And it really grows almost exponentially. So if you're looking at this flow, you're looking at the requirements definition phase, you're looking at testing and integration testing in these different phases of the process. Typically, faults or potential for faults are introduced early, but if they're discovered late, it becomes much, much more expensive to fix those. And so if issues are found later, like in the integration testing phase, it's 16 times more expensive to resolve. In Further down the road in system testing, it's 40 times more expensive. And lastly, at the very end of the process, it's 110 times more expensive.